My wife called me her roommate to her lover, but the call didn't hang up. I recorded 47 minutes, and what I heard destroyed them both. I'm 27 years old, working it for a mid-sized company downtown, and until about 4 months ago, I was the only one making money in my marriage. My wife, Jennifer, stayed home, supposedly looking for work, but never finding anything that seemed suitable to her. You know, there was always something wrong with every opportunity that came up. I didn't have a problem with that. Honestly, I made enough for both of us, and I thought she'd eventually find something. But in the meantime, it was fine. Or so I thought, because it turns out what happened a few months ago basically destroyed everything I thought was my life, and I'm still processing how I didn't see the signs before. We'd been married for like 3 years, together for 5, and honestly, I thought things were going well. Like, not perfect, but what marriage is, right? We had our normal arguments about money or about the fact that she never cleaned as much as I would have liked, but nothing that made me think something was fundamentally wrong. We'd go out to dinner once in a while, watch shows together at night, make plans for the future like eventually buying a house. It was a normal life, boring maybe, but I was happy with that. I guess I should have noticed that she spent a lot of time on her phone, or that she suddenly started dressing up more when she'd go out with friends. But you don't want to be that kind of paranoid and controlling person, you know what I mean? Everything changed on a normal Tuesday in March. I was on my lunch break at the office, eating a mediocre sandwich from the building cafeteria and reviewing some boring reports I had to finish by Friday. I decided to call Jennifer to ask if she needed me to pick up anything on my way home, something super mundane and routine. She answered after like 3 rings, and her voice sounded weird, like nervous or something, and she said, "Hi, honey. I'm a bit busy right now. I'll call you back in a bit, okay?" And I said, "Okay, no problem. See you. Tonight." She hung up quickly, too quickly, and that's when I heard something that froze my blood. The call didn't disconnect. I don't know if it was a technical problem or if she just didn't press the button correctly, but I was still on the line and could hear everything. At first, I thought maybe she was with some friend, and that's why she was in a hurry. But then I heard a man's voice, a voice I definitely didn't recognize, and he said something like, "Sorry, did I interrupt something important?" And Jennifer, my wife, laughed in that flirty way she used to use with me when we first started dating, but that I hadn't heard in months, and she told him, "No, not at all. It was just my roommate asking something about the house. You know how it is." Roommate. She called me her damn roommate. I sat there at my desk with the phone glued to my ear, completely frozen. My brain was trying to find some logical explanation. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she was joking with someone. I know, anything but the obvious. But then I kept listening. There was background noise, like a restaurant or cafe, people talking and plates clinking, and this guy asked her if she'd decided what she was going to order. She said everything looked delicious and she couldn't decide. And he said, "Well, we have all the time in the world. No rush." The way he said it, was intimate, familiar, like someone who knows your wife well enough to have leisurely lunches with her. I didn't hang up. I know it sounds masochistic, but I pulled out my personal phone from my pocket and started recording the call using an app I had installed for recording work meetings. 47 minutes. I listened to 47 minutes of my wife flirting with another man, laughing at his jokes, touching his hand from what I could deduce from the sounds, talking about how much she'd enjoyed the other night and making plans for next time. At one point, he mentioned something about how difficult her situation was, with her still living with me, and she told him not to worry, that it was a matter of time before she found a way to get out, that she just needed the right moment. She was basically planning to leave me, but in the meantime enjoying my money and my roof over her head while sleeping with another guy. The most surreal part was that I just sat there in my cubicle, keeping a completely neutral face because Greg, my coworker, was literally 2 meters away, and I didn't want anyone to know what was happening. On the outside, I looked like I was working normally, checking my computer, taking notes. But inside, I felt like someone had completely emptied me out and filled me back up with cement. I couldn't process the emotions. It was too much, so I just went into autopilot mode and kept recording. Until finally, she said she had to go because she needed to get home before I left work. The guy, who I now knew was named David because she'd said it like 3 times, asked her if I was sure this was okay, if she didn't feel bad about cheating on me. And she literally laughed and said I was so naive and trusting that I'd never suspect anything, that she could do whatever she wanted. That's what finally broke me. Not the infidelity itself, because I already knew that by that point, but hearing that she thought I was stupid, that she was taking advantage of my trust, and found that funny. My hands were shaking when I finally hung up the call, saved the recording with like 5 backup copies in different places because I knew I was going to need it, and just sat there staring at my computer screen without really seeing anything. Greg asked me if I was okay because apparently I'd gone white as paper, and I told him I had a family emergency and needed to leave early. He covered for me with our supervisor without asking questions, and to this day, I'm grateful for that because I wouldn't have been able to explain anything at that moment without completely falling apart. I left the office, got in my 2019 Honda Civic in the parking lot, and sat there for about 10 minutes trying to decide what to do. I could go home and confront her there, but I knew she'd deny everything, cry, make me feel crazy for accusing her. Or I could go to the place where they were having lunch, because I'd heard enough of the conversation to know it was a fancy French bistro like 15 minutes from downtown, a place we'd never been to together because she always said it was too expensive. Apparently it wasn't too expensive when another man was paying the bill. I drove there in a kind of zombie state, not really thinking about what I was going to do when I arrived. The bistro was on a nice corner with outdoor tables and everything, very elegant and romantic, exactly the kind of place Jennifer always said she wanted me to take her, but that I thought was out of our budget. I parked across the street where I could see the entrance, and I saw them come out together about 5 minutes after I arrived. He was tall, well-dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Handsome, I guess, if you like that telenovela heartthrob vibe. Jennifer was wearing a dress I'd never seen, red and tight, and high heels. She looked amazing. Better than she'd looked for me in months, and that hurt in a way I didn't expect. They were standing outside the restaurant talking, and he had his hand on her waist in a way that left no doubt this wasn't just a friendly lunch. I got out of the car with my phone in my hand, the recording already ready, and walked straight toward them. Jennifer saw me first, and I swear, her face went through like 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, fear, anger, and then she tried a smile as if everything was normal. "Marcus," she said, "what are you doing here? I thought you were at work." And I just said, "Yeah, well, I got an interesting call during my lunch break." David, the guy, looked at me confused and asked who I was. And, before Jennifer could say anything, I told him, "I'm her husband, the one who pays for the apartment where she's supposedly looking for work all day." His face changed immediately, and he stepped away from Jennifer like she was burning him. He said, "Wait, husband? You told me you were separated, that you were living together just out of convenience while working out the divorce." And there Jennifer started with the manipulation, trying to explain that it was complicated, that technically, yes, we were married, but the relationship was dead. All the typical excuses that unfaithful people use when they get caught. I pulled out my phone and played the recording on high volume right there on the street. The part where she called me her roommate, the part where she talked about how easy it was to fool me, the part where she planned to leave me but only when it suited her. Jennifer tried to grab my phone, but I kept it out of her reach, and David just listened with a face that mixed disgust and anger. When the most incriminating part finished, he looked at me and said, "Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't know any of this. She told me you were practically divorced and it was just paperwork. If I'd known the truth, I never would have, you know." And he left, literally turned around and walked down the street while Jennifer called after him and begged him to wait. When he disappeared around the corner, she turned to me and suddenly completely changed tactics. She started crying, telling me she was so sorry, that it had been a horrible mistake, that she loved me, and this didn't mean anything. I just stood there feeling strangely empty, because I knew nothing she said was true, that she was just scared of losing her comfortable situation. I told her it was over, that I wanted a divorce, and she immediately stopped crying and got furious. She yelled at me right there on the street that I was boring, that I never paid attention to her, that David treated her like a real woman. All the classic justifications that aren't really justifications, but just attempts to make the cheating my fault somehow. I didn't argue with her. I simply told her she had until 8 that night to get out of the apartment or I'd call the police for trespassing, that the apartment was in my name and I paid for everything so legally I could do that. She laughed and said I'd never have the guts, that I was always too soft and passive. I took out my phone again, this time to call my bank, and right there, while she watched me, I canceled all her additional credit cards and her access to our joint account. The satisfaction I felt when I saw her face of panic was probably petty on my part, but in that moment, I didn't care. I left there and drove straight back to the office, where Greg saw me walk in with what must have been a face of determination or madness or both. I told him very quickly what had happened because I needed someone to know in case Jennifer tried to make up some crazy story later, and he helped me finish the most urgent parts of my work so I could take the rest of the week off without problems. My supervisor was understanding when Greg explained I had a personal emergency, and I left there around 4 in the afternoon with a very clear plan in my head of what I needed to do. First, I went to a cafe with Wi-Fi and looked up divorce lawyers on my phone. I found one who had good reviews and offered same-day emergency consultations, so I called and explained my situation. He gave me an appointment for 6 that evening, which gave me enough time to go to the apartment, pick up my most important things, and leave before Jennifer got back if she decided to return. I also called my friend Ryan, who I'd played basketball with in college and who lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment, and asked if I could stay with him for a few days. He said yes without even asking why, which I appreciated because I wasn't in the mood to give long explanations yet. I got to the apartment around 4:30 and started packing. Clothes, personal laptop, important documents, some sentimental things. I didn't want Jennifer to destroy in a fit of revenge. I stuffed everything into 2 large suitcases and 3 boxes and carried them to my car in 2 trips. The apartment felt strange and empty, like it had never really been my home, and I realized most of the decorations and furniture were things Jennifer had chosen and that I really didn't care about. The only things I really wanted were my Xbox, my book collection, and my work stuff, and all of that fit easily in my car. Just as I was making my last trip to the car, Jennifer arrived. She must have taken an Uber or something because her car had been in the parking lot since morning. She saw me with the boxes and started yelling about what was I doing, that I couldn't just leave like this, that we had to talk about this like adults. I kept walking to my car without responding, and she followed me down the building stairs, yelling louder and louder. Neighbors started peeking out their doors and windows, but honestly, I didn't care. I put the boxes in the trunk, locked it, and turned to her to say one last thing. I told her the apartment was in my name, that I paid for everything, including her phone, which I'd just canceled, and that she had 2 options, leave voluntarily or wait for me to evict her legally, but either way, this was over. She changed tactics again, this time trying to be sweet and reasonable, saying we could go to couples therapy, that she was willing to do whatever it took to fix this. I just said I'd heard her entire conversation with David, that I had recorded how she planned to leave me when it suited her while using me for my money, and that there was absolutely nothing she could say or do that would change my decision. I got in my car and drove to my new lawyer's office, while Jennifer stood there in the parking lot. The consultation was quick and to the point. The lawyer, a guy about 50 years old named Robert, who had that energy of having seen all kinds of horrible divorce cases, listened to my story, reviewed the recording I'd made, and told me I had a very solid case. He explained that in our state, infidelity could affect asset division and that the recording was admissible as evidence. He gave me a clear plan: officially hire his services, file divorce papers as soon as possible, document everything, and avoid any direct contact with Jennifer except through lawyers or text messages that could be used as evidence later. I hired his services right there, paid him the retainer with my credit card, and left feeling like I finally had some control over the situation. I drove to Ryan's apartment, who'd left me a key under the entrance mat, and started unpacking my things in his small living room. He arrived about an hour later with pizzas and beers, and we sat down to eat while I told him the whole story from the beginning. Ryan's a good friend. He didn't try to give me unsolicited advice or tell me maybe I should give Jennifer another chance. He just listened and occasionally said, "That's messed up, man," or "That sucks," and honestly, that was exactly what I needed. That night, Jennifer called me like 20 times from a number I didn't recognize. probably some friend's phone because hers no longer worked. I didn't answer any calls. She also sent me like 50 text messages, oscillating between begging me to come back and threatening to ruin my life. I saved screenshots of all the messages and sent them to my lawyer. At 11 at night, my mom called me, super worried because Jennifer had contacted her saying I'd gone crazy and left her with nothing over unfounded jealousy. I explained the real situation to my mom, sent her the recording, and she immediately supported me and told me to do whatever I had to do to protect myself. Over the next few days, Jennifer contacted everyone we knew in common, trying to create a narrative where I was the villain, but most of our friends either believed me when I showed them the evidence, or just decided to stay neutral and stay away from the drama. There were some people who chose her side, mainly her friends who probably knew about the affair and never told me anything, but honestly those weren't relationships I cared about losing. My lawyer filed the divorce papers 4 days after all this, and an officer served Jennifer with the documents at the apartment. After that, things got worse before they got better. Jennifer apparently decided that if she was going to lose everything, then she was going to cause me as much damage as possible. She emptied the joint account she still had access to before I could do anything about it, like $3,000 that were basically my emergency savings. Fortunately, I'd moved the bulk of my money to a new account in my name only, but those $3,000 hurt. Then, like a week after I sued her, I went to the apartment accompanied by a police officer to pick up some more things I'd left, and I discovered she'd thrown all my remaining belongings from the third-floor balcony onto the street. Clothes, books, photos, everything was scattered across the parking lot and sidewalk, some things broken, others wet because it had rained the night before. Neighbors told me she'd done it the previous afternoon in a fit of rage, screaming about how I was a bastard, and she deserved everything I had. The officer accompanying me documented everything with photos and a report, because technically, that was destruction of property. I recovered what I could salvage, which wasn't much, and left there feeling strangely nothing. I wasn't angry anymore, or sad, just tired of all the drama and wanting this to end as quickly as possible. Jennifer also tried to tell the police I'd hit her and abused her during our marriage, which was completely false. Fortunately, the building had security cameras, and the manager let me review the recordings from the last 2 months, which clearly showed I'd never done anything violent. In fact, the cameras captured several moments where Jennifer left the apartment, all dressed up when I was supposed to be at work, and returned hours later, obviously going to meet David or other guys, who knows. I got official copies of those recordings for my lawyer, and when the police investigated her accusations and found no evidence to support them, they closed the case without filing charges against me. The most unexpected thing was that David, the guy Jennifer was having the affair with, contacted me like 2 weeks after all the drama. He sent me a message on Facebook saying he wanted to talk, and honestly, my first reaction was to completely ignore him, but curiosity won. We met at a Starbucks, very neutral and public setting, and he explained that Jennifer had lied to him about basically everything. She'd told him she worked as a marketing consultant, that I was abusive and controlling, that we were in the process of divorce. All made up to make him feel okay about the affair. When he discovered the truth that day outside the bistro, he immediately ended everything with her and even blocked her everywhere because he hated being used like that. He told me Jennifer had kept trying to contact him after that day, showing up at his work and sending him messages from different numbers, and that he'd had to threaten a restraining order to get her to leave him alone. He offered to testify in my divorce case if necessary, and even had text messages from Jennifer where she admitted she was still married, but that it didn't matter because she'd soon be free. I thanked him for the information, and my lawyer contacted his to obtain official copies of those messages, which were another piece of evidence in my favor. The divorce process took about 3 months total, which honestly was faster than I expected. Jennifer tried to fight for alimony, spousal support money because she didn't work, but my lawyer argued that the infidelity and the fact she'd maliciously emptied our joint account meant she wasn't entitled to anything. The judge agreed, especially after hearing the recording and seeing all the evidence of her lies and manipulations. In the end, she got nothing, except her car that was in her name. And I kept everything else, including the apartment. There was a final hearing where we both had to be present, and it was the first time I'd seen her in person since the day I picked up my things from the apartment. She looked terrible, honestly, like she hadn't slept in weeks. And during the entire hearing, she shot me looks that mixed pure hatred with something that almost looked like regret. I felt nothing. No satisfaction from seeing her like that. No desire to comfort her. Just complete indifference. When the judge declared the divorce finalized, I got up and left the court without looking back. My lawyer caught up with me outside and congratulated me on how I'd handled everything, and I just nodded because I didn't know what else to do. It's been 4 months since that day in court. I moved to my own apartment, smaller than the previous one, but completely mine, without any memories of Jennifer or our life together. I changed all my numbers and accounts, blocked Jennifer and her friends from all social media, basically started from scratch in many ways. Some days I feel good, relieved to have gotten out of that situation before it got even worse. Like before we had kids or bought a house together. Other days I feel kind of empty. Not because I miss Jennifer specifically, but because I miss the idea of what I thought we had. Last week, I ran into David again. By chance, at a restaurant where I'd gone to eat alone. We greeted each other awkwardly, and he asked me how I was handling everything. I told him the truth, that some days were better than others, but overall, I felt at peace with my decision. He told me he'd started dating someone new, someone he met through friends, and this time, he'd taken the time to verify she wasn't lying about her situation. We both laughed at that, like a bitter but genuine laugh, and we wished each other good luck before going our separate ways. For now, I'm focused on my work, which has gone incredibly well since I don't have all the stress of a failing marriage consuming my mental energy, and on rebuilding my life the way I want it. I go out with friends on weekends. I've picked up hobbies I dropped when I was with Jennifer. Basically, I'm rediscovering myself as an individual person instead of as half of a dysfunctional couple. It's weird, but liberating at the same time. My mom keeps asking me if I'm really okay or just pretending to be. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure of the answer. There are nights where I lie awake thinking about all the signs I ignored, all the times Jennifer was probably with David or other guys, while I work to support her. And I get angry with myself for being so trusting. But then I remember that trusting your partner isn't stupid, that the problem wasn't my trust but her betrayal, and I try not to be so hard on myself. It's a process, I guess, and some days are definitely better than others. What I do know is that I'm never going to forget that moment when I heard Jennifer call me her roommate. When I heard how she laughed about how easy it was to fool me. That changed me in a fundamental way. Made me less naive, but also more cautious. And I'm not sure if that's good or bad yet. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time, focusing on what I can control, and trying to build a life that makes me happy without needing validation or company from anyone else. And that, for now, is enough.